After 6 years and a few delays, the Turn 10 team returns to the tarmac with the highly anticipated sim racer, Forza Motorsport. After about 30 hours of playtime, there is a ton to like about the new installment, but it isn't without a few hiccups. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and let's dive into what makes Forza great, as well as a few things that I hope gets changed. When hopping into the cockpit of your favorite car in a sim-style racer, it's all about how the cars feel and handle on the circuit. Past complaints of the Forza Motorsport franchise is how the car's handling feels more sim-adjacent than a full-blown sim racer. While it's not to the same level of an Assetto Corsa, the racing does feel punishing if you don't manage your speed and raceline on the track. That feeling is very on brand for Forza Motorsport, and the accessibility to the sim racing scene is what makes motorsport approachable and addicting. Every car class and era had tangible differences in how they understeer, oversteer, and how aggressive you can be hitting those turns. It's a feeling that kept me wanting to try more and more cars out to feel the strengths and weaknesses of manufacturers' cars. I thought the cars as a whole were fun and engaging to drive, however, I did notice that some of the higher-end hypercars felt a little loose and had a surprising amount of oversteer. I was expecting the exotic cars that produce a ton of downforce to feel like I was velcroed to the tarmac, but turns felt a little slick from time to time. It wasn't oversteer to the point of drifting out of control, but it felt disconnected at times with those specific hypercars. One big improvement from Motorsport 7 was how the curbs and ripple strips feel. In Forza 7, the curbs felt like half your car was hitting a banked road that would often send you spinning sideways or getting bucked off the track. In the newest Motorsport, the curbs feel more realistic and responsive to how they can be utilized to get every bit of speed out of your turns. When racing on my Logitech G923 racing wheel, the handling felt great with solid feedback from collisions, understeer, oversteer, hitting curbs, and undulations along the tracks. If you are using a racing wheel, you will most likely have to tweak the wheel settings within Forza because out of the box, it did need some tightening up. On controller, the racing feels very accessible, predictable, and didn't need much tweaking. Obviously, you lack a little throttle and wheel freedom when using a controller compared to a wheel, but the cars still felt great when playing on the sticks. In regards to the driver AI, the developers mentioned an overhaul in how the AI drives and reacts to you. The AI improvement is noticeable with a lot more competitive cars, especially at the front of the pack. It feels like the AI is set up almost like difficulty tiers, where the back of the pack is pretty easy to overtake, the middle grouping has its moments of great racing and letting you pass, and the front of the pack will demand you to hit your apexes properly to take the lead. I had a lot of memorable moments going back and forth with some of the cars trying to grab a podium position and made for some engaging racing. One aspect of the AI that I personally enjoyed was the human-like element that they would show. You'll be fighting for positions mid-race and see a car brake too late into a turn and understeer off the track, or two cars take each other out and you have to react quickly to avoid collateral damage. It added a human element that made each race feel exciting and unpredictable, which makes for some great, memorable racing. The only aspect of the AI that was frustrating was the lack of space the drivers would give you at times. I would find myself at times side by side with another racer with inside position on the turn and get blatantly smacked as if I wasn't there and they were racing a predetermined line. It doesn't occur all the time, but it happened enough that I didn't feel comfortable deactivating the rewind option. I'm not letting an AI driver derail my race because they ran me off the road unprovoked. I do want to reiterate, it wasn't a regular occurrence, but noticeable enough that I hope it gets patched. Even though I try to avoid getting pinched on the inside, the collisions sound and feel impactful to how you and the other driver's cars react. If you slam into someone too hard from behind, you're definitely both going off the track. And if you rub side by side, it will generate wheel pull towards the other car, forcing you to really work to get off of them. Overall, the racing feels really solid with only a few hiccups with the oversteer on the hypercars and AI running into you a little too often. The cars feel unique and have a lot of personality that you can feel on the track. It certainly isn't the most true sim feel like Assetto Corsa, but rather feels like the perfect gateway drug to the hardcore sim racers. If you've never played a Forza Motorsport game, or if you're a returning fan, you'll enjoy how the cars handle without feeling like you need a driver's ed course in track racing. When diving into the car selection, you're welcomed with over 500 cars at your racing fingertips. The catalog is massive, with a wide variety ranging from the iconic classics to some of the most technologically advanced machines on four wheels. There's so many cars to choose from that you'll be bound to find your favorite car to hop into, rip up the circuit, and start leveling up your baby. My only two complaints with the car catalog are the lack of some of the most recent exotic cars and a few repetitive choices. Forza is known for granting Forza editions to some cars, which usually consist of some custom tuning and a body kit. I personally enjoy the Forza edition cars, but it makes purchasing the base model kinda pointless, especially since the upgrades you earn on the Forza edition won't carry over to the base model. So while there are 500 cars to choose from, there are some redundancies within the catalog. Luckily, Forza consistently adds more cars each month to their catalog, so there will always be a reason to check it at the car shop and see what's new. In regards to the sound of the cars and their engines, it's a noticeable improvement from Forza 7. The lack of variety in engine sounds was a major gripe in past Forza titles, and the Turn 10 crew listened to the feedback. The cars sound more alive than ever and have distinct differences to how they sound. I'm not saying all 500 cars have unique sounds that you can differentiate, but I never felt like all the V8 engines sounded exactly the same. The final aspect of the car catalog that I really appreciate is the fact that the most expensive car is only 450,000 credits. I personally can't stand cars that you have to grind a million plus credits for and then watch your bankroll go down to zero all for one car. Having more affordable pricing makes it an encouraging feeling to spend your credits and try out a ton of cars without that buyer's remorse. While the racing feels great and there are certainly a ton of cars to choose from, the track plays just as big of an importance. There are 20 tracks in total, which is mildly disappointing considering Forza 7 had 30 plus tracks at launch. The Turn 10 team have already made it clear that more tracks are coming in the near future, but it did feel like a small step backwards. With that being said, the tracks that are here at launch are absolutely gorgeous and feel great. I really enjoyed the imperfections you can feel on the tarmac, the variety of forgiving and unforgiving curbs, and the scenery surrounding the track. There were a few times where I ended up having to restart my race because I got distracted by the luscious vistas and blew straight through a turn and into a wall. Even though the track list isn't as long as prior titles, you are granted multiple iterations of each track with a range of small, medium, and long circuits for each location. The track length variety made it so I never really felt like I was running the same track over and over. It kept me engaged in learning new things about each specific track location that made it easy to forget that there were only 20 track destinations. In my opinion, a sim racer can't be considered a true sim experience without some amazing graphics. Forza Motorsport delivers on that expectation with gorgeous cars, luscious ray tracing, stunning scenery, dynamic weather, and some of the best lighting I've seen in a racing game. The cars as a whole look amazing with sexy lines, glossy paint, and great detail on each car. The scenery around each track matches the car's beauty with great detail in the trees, mountain ranges, and crowd stands populating the tracks. The detail of the surrounding areas make each track feel alive, immersive, and unique to each location. Mix in the dynamic weather and it's a combination that makes me want to lick the raindrops right off my car. I loved how the weather changed throughout a single race where you can start in fog, then see the sun burn it off and turn into a clear day. The rain had levels of intensity ranging from a light drizzle to a torrential downpour that made tracks behave differently, though I do wish the extremely wet tracks played more unforgiving than they actually did. When the tracks were wet, it felt like you had to brake a little sooner, but I didn't feel the throttle control was very important in super wet conditions, which felt like a miss. My only real complaint about the dynamic weather is how flat cars looked when the weather was clear and the sun was at a high noon position. As a photographer, noon is the worst time to capture anything and make it look good, so the flat look is kind of fitting for the noon time of day, but it's an area I wish they didn't try to make as accurate to real life. It's not a deal breaker, but noticeable compared to all of the other times of day. The dynamic weather, lovely scenery, and beautiful cars are great, but what really stood out for me was the ray tracing on these cars. The performance ray tracing mode means you get the 60 frames per second plus that beautiful ray tracing. I could watch a replay of a race and merely stare at the hood of my car as the surrounding track scenery reflects perfectly off of it. Even reflections on wet tracks were noticeable and added a true sense of life to the tracks and cars. It's a next-gen feeling that I couldn't get enough of and makes me excited for more next-gen games to utilize ray tracing in the future. It is worth mentioning that one time I did have the ray tracing absolutely wig out on me after booting up the game via Xbox's Quick Resume feature. I ended up restarting the game, which fixed the problem, and I haven't had the issue pop up since, but it is, like I said, worth mentioning. Forza Motorsport's career mode comes in the form of a Builder's Cup where you race in a multitude of championships that focus on you driving one car for each respective championship. At the start of each new set of races, you're granted the ability to purchase a car that fits the required restrictions such as a manufacturer, car type, or era. This year, Forza opted for a car RPG style leveling system where you unlock upgrades to your respective car the more you use it. Because of this, the emphasis is on using one car per championship and upgrading it as you go. Instead of using credits, you earn points for your car to use on upgrade parts. On one hand, it's nice that you don't have to use credits on upgrades and purchasing cars, but it does limit some freedom that was familiar in past Forza titles. The leveling up system is something you're either going to love or hate. I personally like it for two reasons. One, it allows you to really get to know your car and understand how it performs before slapping a bunch of upgrades on it. In tandem, this system makes upgrading your car accessible and not as overwhelming as before. Second, the car leveling goes pretty quickly in my opinion, so I never felt like I was grinding for no reason. As you do get further into the game, I wish you could pay credits to bypass some of the levels, but overall it gave me something to work towards that didn't feel like a credit grind. If you're trying to maximize each race, the best way to quickly level up is by running clean races and well-executed race segments. So the better you drive, the better the rewards, which for me, I was a fan of. Additionally, each race location has a set of practice laps that you complete before diving into the actual race. This is a great way to learn the track while also leveling up your car. One tip worth mentioning is you do not have to complete the practice laps in order to do the race. There isn't a skip option at the initial race menu, but to skip the practice session, all you'll need to do is enter the practice laps, then tap exit and skip practice. It took me quite a few races to realize that skipping was an option, and I wish it was a little easier to find. Just keep in mind that skipping practice means you're missing out on leveling up your car, so it does come at a small cost. My only other complaint about the Builders Cup is some of the early championships felt a little lengthy. This is due mostly in part with the cars that you're required to drive. The first couple championships throw you into a hatchback and more lower end cars that are great to drive, but the slower speeds and longer lap counts make it a little sluggish at the start. After the first championship or two though, things really open up and that feeling quickly fades away. If single player isn't for you, the online racing is something fresh within Forza that I absolutely adore. Instead of diving straight into an online race, now you join a session that consists of practice time, qualifying laps, and then the final race. Each race has a dedicated real-life start time, so you can hop into online races that have 8 to 10 minutes of pre-race time, or quickly jump in and knock out some qualifying laps right before the start of a race. I absolutely love this because it creates a sense of a race day with you and your online competitors. I love that everything is earned and your performance pre-race matters. There are even race penalties like track cutting that will add to your qualifying time, so the focus is all about clean, hard racing. That same focus translates to the race as a safety score is tracked and graded based on how tidy you drive. Unnecessary collisions and track cutting lead to time penalties tacked onto your final finishing time, so driving clean is the most important thing you should focus on when doing online racing. A good safety score means better racing, so if you want to avoid getting hard stuck in toxic lobbies, take your safety score seriously. Another addition to Forza's online mode is tire and gas management that adds a fun layer of strategy to the mix. Do you opt for soft tires for a hot start but lack of traction at the end of the race? Or do you go for a medium tire to hedge your bet? It's a little game of chess that gets played within each lobby that adds a fun element of surprise when duking it out on the track. In Forza's past, I was more of a single player racer, but the new online format is addicting, fun, rewarding, and my go-to mode when hopping on the game. At the end of the day, Forza is the most accessible sim racer on the market that feels like a gateway drug to more hardcore sim games like Assetto Corsa. It's a game that anyone can pick up, find a car they love, and have the game sink its teeth into you. The racing will challenge you without feeling overwhelming and can be adjusted based on the difficulty sliders. You'll have to decide if the car RPG elements are for you or not, but I personally really enjoyed it. The cars, tracks, and scenery are gorgeous with a true next-gen feel that will leave you drooling. There's a few things that hold it back from being the best racer in gaming, but Xbox now has their premier next-gen sim racer. Whether you're a Forza or Gran Turismo fan, you can't go wrong with either of them, and racing is in a very good place in 2023. Forza Motorsport has a couple slip-ups, but makes a podium finish with an 8 out of 10. And that right there wraps up the review of Forza Motorsport. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, a like goes a long way. To stay up to date on future reviews, slap that subscribe button and join the crew. This is Josh Robinson with Joystick Gamer. Thank you as always, and go racing out there.